Hello, friends. Welcome to Theology in the Raw 2025. I am very excited about the new year, and what I want to do in this episode is sort of look back at some highlights, some things that we talked about in 2024, share some statistics, read some reviews, talk about the nature of the podcast. And what else are we going to do? We're going to talk about future upcoming guests on the show. We're going to talk about the Exiles of Babylon conference in April and much, much more in this first of the year Theology Raw podcast. We got no guest today, just myself, so you're gonna have to tolerate my monologue here. But I'm super excited to dig in. Let's start by looking at some stats from 2024. I had I think I've said this several times, but podcasting is one of my most favorite things that I do in life. I really mean that. I absolutely love having curious conversations with a diverse range of interesting people. And 2024 was absolutely fantastic. In my book, I think back at the various conversations I had, and I learned so much through conversations. I learn about people. I learn about things that people are interested in, especially when I have like experts on that are really, well versed in a certain area, and I get to just learn from them through a conversation. So I absolutely love it. I love it. I do many things in life. I help run a nonprofit, the Center for Faith, Sexuality, and Gender. I write books. I speak. Do various. There's lots of like admin kind of responsibilities that occupy my time. A lot of that I don't like. That's probably the least favorite thing I do. Emails and such. But podcasting is just at the top of the list. I just absolutely love it, and I can't imagine not podcasting. So, Theology Raw received 4 million streams in 2024. Just about, that's a rough number, but it's pretty close to that actually. Which equals about 10,700 daily streams of the program, which places Theology Raw in, apparently, I didn't realize this, the top 0.5% of all podcasts globally. I think that sounds higher than it is. The fact is, there are, I don't know how many podcasts are out there, millions. But the overwhelming majority of podcasts, I learned recently, they don't last, or they're not consistent. It's actually a very small percentage of all the podcasts that are consistently putting out episodes. And we've been putting out 2 episodes a week since 2020. It used to be 1 episode a week. And we went to 2 episodes a week in 2020, and we haven't looked back. We've been doing 2 episodes for the last 4 years. Actually, if you go back to the beginning of Theology in the Raw, as some of you might know, Theology in the Raw started before it was a podcast. It was a radio program, a 15-minute radio program, local radio program in Boise, Idaho, and it was called "What Does the Bible Actually Say?" And it was a daily 15-minute radio program. So you might, if you look at how many episodes Theology in the Raw has had, it's over 1,200. You might think, gosh, this guy's been doing, 2 episodes a week, hour-long episodes, and he's been doing over 1,200 of these. That's actually not true. The first several hundred episodes of Theology in the Raw were just, 15-minute short observations of Scripture, basically. And so I think we got into these several hundred episodes, pretty quickly, because we're doing 5 a week. And then once the radio program stopped, we just kind of rolled it into a podcast, rebranded it as Theology in the Raw. Then we started doing just Q&A. I would get questions from the audience. Like I still do that, twice a month. But that used to be what the show was. And then, honestly, I think my motivation was, dude, I can't. This is a ton of work. I can't keep up with once a week, taking all these questions and answering all these questions. Like that got a bit overwhelming. I'm like, maybe I should start integrating just some conversations with people. Those started as kind of 20, 30-minute conversations, grew into hour-long conversations, and then went to 2 days a week back in 2020. So that's the short history of Theology in the Raw. So yeah, 4 million streams last year in 2024. Now here, so in 2023, we were recorded. The stat was 5.7 million streams in 2023. Now that might seem, well, it does. It's like, gosh, Theology in the Raw is tanking. It's going down. Fewer and fewer listeners. But actually, Apple, most people listen on Apple. I think it's like 70% people listen on Apple. And Apple last year, they changed the way they record streams. So in the past, prior to last year, they would record anybody who somebody explained this to me. I hope I get this right. Basically, like when you follow a show, a podcast, your phone used to kind of automatically download the episodes, whether or not you listen to it. And so you might have, like I do, I probably have like 40 podcasts on my app. I might only listen to like 3 or 4 consistently. But in the past, Apple was recording, it was making note of anytime my phone simply downloaded an episode. Now, most of the podcasts, I'm not even listening to them. There's been I look at podcasts on my phone. I'm like, I haven't listened to this in like 2 years. So the previous way of recording streams was completely inflated. It was not accurate. It's not. It was measuring how many episodes were being downloaded onto people's phones, but it wasn't actually measuring how many people are listening to these episodes. So I don't know all the details, but they reworked their statistics so that now it is giving a more accurate and hence lower number of readings in terms of how many streams people got. So I've talked to people in the podcast industry, and they said they've seen shows that dropped up to like 50% of recorded streams given the new way that Apple's doing it. So it's hard, it's impossible to measure if the show has shrunk in audience size, stayed the same, or gained in audience size. But going from 5.7 to only 4 million, that's actually, I think it's grown actually, because, a lot of shows are recording, 25 to 50% drop off given the new way they're doing it. So Theology hasn't experienced that much. So all that to say, we won't be able to measure how much if the show has grown in audience until next year when we compare next year, so that we have 2 years of this new way of recording. Okay, most streamed episodes. Let your mind wander which ones you think they are. The number one, the top performing episode of 2024, Theology Raw, drumroll please, was the episode responding to Alyssa Childers and Dr. Christopher Yuan, which received 52,042 streams in 2024. That was the number one streamed episode. I'm not sure the exact date on that. It was back in the spring of 2024 sometime. So if you're interested in hearing the most streamed episode, you can go check that one out. That was responding to another podcast, YouTube conversation between Alyssa Childers and Christopher Yuan, where I felt like there were several things that they ascribed to me that were inaccurate. And so I wanted to kind of clear the air on what I actually believe, not what some of my critics say I believe. Okay, so that was the number one streamed episode. Number two, I was shocked at this. The second most streamed episode was my episode, Our Husbands, the Head of Their Wives, The Meaning of Kephale, Part 1 by just myself. This aired on March 18th. Oh yeah, so the Alyssa Childers one, that was May 9th. I have the date here in front of me now. So why I'm shocked at the second most streamed episode is because that was like a super long, very technical episode where I kind of walk through some really nitty-gritty details about the meaning of the Greek term kephale, which is translated head. I honestly, I think it was like a 2.5 hour episode. I almost didn't record that because I'm like, who is going to listen to 2.5 hours of very in-depth technical monologue, about this Greek word? And well, I guess I was wrong. A lot of people were interested in that. And third most downloaded episode or streamed episode, this one was with Tim Alberta, evangelicalism's fascination or idolatry of cultural and political power. Okay, so Tim Alberta wrote that book, For the Kingdom and Power and Glory or something like that. I forget what it was, but yeah, it was a book. Really, really good book. Really good book documenting kind of the problem of evangelicalism's kind of grasp for political power. That one received about 39,000 streams. The next, okay, so number 4 episode, Does the Bible Affirm Same-Sex Relationships, with Dr. Rebecca McLaughlin. Number 5 was Raising Boys, Masculinity, Jordan Peterson, and Why Wrestling with Your Sons Keeps Them Out of Prison, with Dr. Anthony Bradley. Really love that episode. Number 6 was what was the first century church actually like, with Dr. Nijay Gupta. 7, Sexuality, Church, Celibate Partnerships, my response to Chris Yawn and Rosaria Butterfield, and how I handle criticism, with my friend Lori Krieg. The 8th most streamed episode, A Raw Conversation with Josh Garrels. Number 9, Does the Church Have a Crisis of Biblical Illiteracy, with Jen Wilkin. And then number 10, How to Tell the Truth, with Preston Perry. Man, yeah, a little walk down memory lane. The audience breakdown from last year. Okay. The year before, in 2023, the audience breakdown in terms of male and female was about 60-40, 60% male, 40% female. I was really excited about that, because as most podcasts that have the audience is dominated by the sex of the host, typically. And so to have 40% female with a male host, I thought I was really excited about that. I'm a little bummed, I think, that in 2024, my audience was 66% male and 34% female. So that gives us a slight drop off in, well, I don't know, is it a drop off in female listenership, or is it simply an increase in male listenership? We can't really tell. But I would love to, obviously, I would love to have it 50% or close to it. I do try to have, in terms of my guests, I don't know if I've said this publicly. I think I have. I do try pretty hard to have as close to 50% male and 50% female guests. That doesn't always work out that way for various reasons. A lot of times I'll reach out to a bunch of people to come on the show, and it might happen that several men that I reach out to say yes, and several women say they can't do it, don't want to do it, I don't hear back, or whatever. So that's another thing you don't see that goes on behind the scenes, is like how many times I'm reaching out to people to be on the podcast, and I simply don't hear back, or can't find their email, or post a message in their website and I never hear back, or they simply can't do it, or they're on sabbatical and they say reach back out next year or whatever. There's a lot more people I'm reaching out to that don't end up on the podcast. So, but just so you know, like I do try to get about a 50-50 balance. So sometimes it's kind of streaky. Like I remember looking back, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, when I look back, and as I'm scheduling things, sometimes I'm not keeping track of who's going where, which podcast is being released. But there was a stretch where it was like 2 months where it was like one female guest and the rest were men. I'm like, all right, I really want to make sure we maintain healthy diversity here. So yeah, if you see a whole string of all male or even all female guests, just know that that's not intent. Like I do try to be aware of that and try to balance it out as best as I can. The age breakdown, I was really surprised at this. Okay, let's go through how old are the people listening to this podcast? Let me just say up front, it is extremely diverse in terms of age. Okay, let's start at the youngest audience, 18 to 24. So older Gen Z. That only makes up 2.5% of my audience. That's by far the smallest age demographic, is 18 to 24-year-olds. Then there's a big jump when you get to 25 to 34-year-olds to 19.9. Let's just call it 20%. 20% of y'all are younger millennials, 25 to 34. All right, 35 to 44. So now we're getting closer to my age. This is the largest demographic at 22%. 22% of Theology and Raw listeners are 35 to 44-year-old. 18% are 45 to 54. So that's my age there. I'm 48, so I'm right in the middle of this. 18%. So far, apart from the Gen Z, we've got pretty almost equal breakdown here. The second lowest age demographic next to Gen Z is our 55 to 64-year-olds, older Gen Xers, younger boomers. 17.8% are within that age range. Now, here's the one that excites me. I can't tell you how this just thrills me. 19.8%. This is the second, well, just about. It's almost like tied for second largest demographic, are 65 and over. Basically 20% of you are 65 and older. Why am I excited about that? Because typically a host is going to attract people largely around their age or maybe younger. And I think a lot of people assume Theology in the Raw, it's got a younger vibe. It's going to appeal for a more younger audience. And it does. There's, a lot of listeners that are my age or younger. But 20% are over 65. I love that so much. And, I think about like the people that I have conversations with on through our Patreon community. And now that I think about it, when I looked at this stat, I'm like, yeah, a lot of people I interact with that we have Zoom chats with and messages and stuff. I'm like, yeah, they're a lot of them, decent percentage are my age or older. So yeah, I'm as my mom would say, tickled pink by seeing the diversity in the age breakdown. Hey friends, if Theology in Raw has blessed or challenged you in any way, would you consider supporting the show through Patreon at patreon.com/Theology in the Raw? We are actually revamping our bonus material that Patreon supporters get. So we are going to 2 bonus Q&As per month for all the different paid levels. Silver level gets access to ask questions for the Q&A episode. And also, you will get access to Exiles in Babylon archived content, which will be releasing different videos every month. Also, access to bonus research episodes that I'm gonna record from time to time. Access to rough drafts of certain things I'm working on, which is a little scary for me to let people look into that because it's a rough draft. Gold and Gold Plus members get we have monthly Zoom chats and all the other perks that the other tiers get access to as well. So again, if you want to support the show, it really, really does help us to flourish as a ministry. Again, patreon.com/Theology in the Raw. I will see you in the community. The Exiles in Babylon Conference is happening again April 3rd to April 5th, 2025 in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I cannot wait for this conference. We're talking about the gospel and race after George Floyd. We're talking about transgender people in the church, social justice in the gospel, 2 perspectives, and a dialogical debate about whether the evangelical church is good for this country, featuring my new friend Adam Davidson. He's an atheist journalist, and Sean McDowell, my other good friend. They're going to banter around about that topic. We also have Latasha Morrison, Ephraim Smith, Mark Yarhouse, Malcolm Foley, and many other awesome speakers. We're also adding some breakouts this year, and we're going to have a killer after party. And I can't wait for that one, actually. If you want to attend a conference, you can do so by going to theologyraw.com. You want to register early. We do have an early bird, a fairly aggressive early bird special. It ends December 31st. So if you are planning on attending the conference, you want to sign up before then. You can also attend virtually if you can't make it out to Minneapolis. Again, April 3rd to 5th, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Exiles of Babylon. Go to theologyintheraw.com, and I hope to see you there. All right, let's move on to let me state the mission of Theology Raw again. I got to do this every year. The Theology Raw podcast aims to help believers think Christianly about theological and cultural issues by engaging in curious conversations with a diverse range of thoughtful people. I've reflected a lot on like the nature of the genre of podcasting, and it's so new to kind of society, relatively speaking. I mean, what podcasts been around for 10, 15 years or whatever. So it's a fairly new medium of information or conversations. And so it is a bit different. I think we're still a lot of, podcasting is still a bit of a wet cement. But the genre of the podcast is a really broad genre. I mean, you could have a podcast that is more debate oriented. So you have on guests that you disagree with so that you can debate them. I'm thinking of, Pierce Morgan often has, I watch Pierce Morgan a lot. Some of them are interesting. Some of them are just really frustrating, or some of them are just downright people yelling at each other and stuff. And it's like that's one way to go about it. Have a couple people on that are just gonna go after each other. Podcasts can also just be teaching. I could, like my good friend John Whitaker, his podcast. Why am I blanking on the name of it? John, my apologies. I have to find this. Why am I blanking on the name? Oh my gosh. I listened to all the, okay. The listener's commentary. My word. Apologize, John. The listener's commentary. This is where John just basically gives a commentary on the biblical text. He is teaching people the Bible. And he's like, according to my best understanding, this is what the Bible means. I believe it, and so should you. He doesn't say it like that. I mean, it's very, the tone's not like that, but I mean, that's kind of what he's doing. He's teaching the Bible. And I think that's a incredible use of a podcast. You can also have like planned conversations, right? I think when I listen to the Office ladies, I do listen to the Office ladies. Or anyway, if you don't know what that is, and you don't know, if you do, you know exactly what I'm talking about. When they talk, it feels a little bit scripted. Like I think they planned ahead of time. Okay, I'm going to say this. I'm going to say that. Maybe not. Maybe it's not. It just doesn't feel as natural. It feels a little bit planned for the most part. So Theology in the Raw is kind of none of those things. I might dabble in each one of those. I might every now, I did have a debate last year. I do some direct more teaching. But most of my conversations are unplanned, unscripted, curious conversations with a diverse range of interesting people, not just people I agree with, but people I might not agree with. There are times when I have on people that I probably have a lot of disagreements with, but I'm just not a debater. I don't like debates. I'm not skilled at that. I do think they fall into performance, people not trying to get closer to the truth, but just simply trying to win a debate, win the audience. And I just don't like that. Sometimes people are gifted at that. I'm not, I don't like it. And I just don't like the performance aspect of it. Anyway, so if I have somebody on that I'm like, I probably have a lot of disagreements with this person, I'm not typically going to have them on to debate, but I might have them on as sort of like, if I can, I don't know, I've never heard this phrase before, but like theological journalism. For instance, let me just name a name. I had Pete Enns on a while back. Okay, Pete Enns and I have some. I'm sure we have things we would disagree on theologically. I think he would say the same thing. I had Pete on not to debate him, not to show him where he's wrong, but to simply get to know, what does Pete Enns actually believes. I've heard lots of critics of Pete Enns say what they think he believes. I want to hear from Pete Enns. What do you believe? It was theological journal. It was like me interviewing somebody simply to try to understand their beliefs more. And I remember in that episode, he said that he was a panentheist. Like God is in everything. And I was like, huh. And I'm thinking in my mind when he said that, like, pretty sure that's her heresy. If God is literally in everything, then we should worship everything. So the ceiling, the ground, the rock, we should be worshiping that. Is that what Pete Enns believes? Or is there some other understanding of panentheism that maybe he means something different by the term? This is my internal split second kind of what was going on in my mind. So instead of saying panentheism, well, here's what this means, Pete, and this is why you're a heretic, I was like, I wonder if he means something different by that term. So what do you mean by that term? And when he explained it, it didn't seem, from my mind, really super heretical. Again, I would need more time to kind of think through that. But that's another aspect of genuine, curious conversations is I'm not, if I hear something I think I might not agree with, they've explained it and I wouldn't know how to counter that, then I'm gonna just table it in my mind and say, okay, maybe I need to go and revisit this issue at a later time. I can't do that here in live time. Hey, Pete, pause for 3 hours. I'm gonna go read a chapter of a book and see if you're a heretic or not. So if you are coming at the podcast expecting nothing but direct teaching, here is what is true, here's what you should believe, I'm having this guest on because I want you to believe everything they say, then you're going to be very frustrated at Theology in a Row. That is not the goal of the podcast. And there's other podcasts that do that and do it well. And I think there should be podcasts to do that and do it well. That's just simply not what Theology in the Raw is. So this is, I'll say this one more time. I probably don't need to say this because I think it's waning out. But the whole concern about platforming, that the noun platform has become a verb over the last few years, and there's been this, kind of like a big concern on both the left and the right about platforming people on the other side, and I'll get that accusation. I feel like I get it less now. I feel like that kind of the fear of platforming was big and like over the last few years, but I feel like it's starting to wane now. I feel like people are kind of tired of that. But yeah, it just doesn't concern about me platforming certain guests. That I think that misunderstands the nature and genre of the kind of conversations I'm having. If I had somebody on and they're preaching tons of error and I gave the impression like, hey, you guys should believe this. This guy doesn't believe in the Trinity. And yeah, you guys shouldn't believe in the Trinity. Like if I was, I could see somebody being concerned if that was the case, but that's just not the nature of the kinds of conversations that we're having. Quick word about advertisements. Okay. So we are, I haven't talked about this in the podcast too much, but we, how do I screen advertisements? All of all the things I advertise are things that I am reading. So I have to feel comfortable enough in the product that I think somebody should consider this product if it sounds like something that they need or want or would be good for their life. I don't need to be so sold on the product that I'm like gonna tell people you must buy this. You should absolutely buy this. It's the best thing in the world. Like I couldn't do that. There are some products that, a classic example would be like Athletic Greens, which I've been taking long before I started advertising it. And I actually love this product. I think it's actually extremely good for you. It's among the best supplements that I personally have come across, and I notice a difference. And on and on. All the stuff I say about that product, I believe. Like they're not giving me what to say. I'm saying that. There are other products I'm less familiar with, but I'm like, hey, yeah, this one, I'm not sure I would purchase this simply for no any specific reason, but it might be something that somebody else might be interested in. There's, for instance, I haven't advertised this yet, but there's some podcasts advertise a certain kind of dog food. And I wonder, like, would I be able to advertise that? I'm like, well, I have a dog. I actually love my dog. Like, I'm obsessed with my dog, actually. Like, my kids say, you're constantly petting Tank. My dog's name is Tank. And sometimes I don't even realize it. Like, I need to be, like, touching my dog's head and his floppy ears. And just, I love my dog. And so I need to feed my dog. And so I need to give my dog food. Sometimes I give him scraps of, beef fat or whatever. Loves that. He loves beef fat. But like, yeah, could I advertise if I checked out the company that made the dog food and it didn't seem, creepy or sinister or ripping people off, whatever? I'm like, all right, I think I could if it seemed like a good product. Doesn't mean I'm like championing dog food now. Whatever. It's like, well, no, I think I could let people know about that. So all that to say, I do battle with the whole advertising thing because it can, marketing and advertising and gimmicks and, I scroll on like Instagram and I get all these advertisements and I'm like, there's something about that world that feels icky. At the same time, people do want to know about certain products that are out there. It's kind of inevitable. So I want you to know that I am constantly battling that line, like choosing advertisements that I think are worth considering, and not falling into some sleazy salesman mode or something. And yet sales isn't intrinsically bad. Selling products isn't intrinsically bad. But yeah, so I want you to know that I turn down most advertisements that come my way. I get suggested a lot, and I'm constantly screening different products. Maybe that's something that would be good to know too. It's not like somebody says, "Hey, but can you promote this?" I'm like, "Sure, no problem." Like, no, I usually spend a bit of time looking at the product. I'm considering who sent it to me, who recommended it. I'm looking at the nature of the product. I'm reading the website, doing as much as I can. Of course, I can't fly out and meet the CEO and really get, sit down and get to know the vision or whatever the company. But like, I do try to do enough to where I feel good that, hey, I think this product is worth checking out. Okay, some upcoming guests. Oh man, I'm excited. Some first-time guests coming up on the show. Annie Downs is going to be in the house. Christine Kane is going to be on the show. Malcolm Foley. I'm really looking forward to this one. I got to know Malcolm last fall and really, really love his theological passion and the dude's just amazing. Nijay Gupta has been on a couple times. He's coming back on. Carmen Imes has been on. She's coming back on. Sharon Hottie Miller. It's been a while since Sharon's been on. Nancy Piercy. I've already recorded that one. You're going to love that episode, The Toxic War on Masculinity. Mark Nation, who is a Bonhoeffer scholar who disagrees significantly with Eric Metaxas's famous work on Bonhoeffer. He's going to be on the show to set us straight over who Bonhoeffer actually was. And then Brian Zahn and Jay Newman talking about rock and roll. We'll see how this one goes. There's not going to be, maybe we'll squeeze in some theology, why should Christians care about rock and roll? But we're just going to talk about who the best bands are and banter around. So I'm actually about to record that one right now. So by the time you're listening to this, it will be already been recorded and will be coming out in January. Last but not least, we have our Exiles in Babylon conference. I am so excited about this. April 3rd to 5th, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Kind of going back to the whole platforming thing, like the Exiles in Babylon conference is a blend of speakers that are communicating truth that I think everybody should believe. And there's also speakers that are sharing their perspective that I want Christians to think through. We make this very clear at the conference that you're going to have a range of these things. In fact, we have 2 of the 4 sessions in particular is evangelicalism good for this country, and 2 perspective on social justice and the gospel that are going to have, very clearly different perspectives. Also, we are having a session on transgender people in the church. Now, Mark Yarhouse is a psychologist expert in the field, and then he's going to give a talk. I'm going to give a talk. He's going to give the psychological perspective. I'm going to give a theological perspective. Those sort of main stage talks are more in the genre of, we think this is true. You should consider this. Then we're also, of course, neither Mark or I are trans identified. So of course we're going to have a few different testimonies from trans identified people or formerly trans identified people. We're still working out the details there, but we're probably going to have a non-transitioned, non-binary identified Christian, a transitioned trans woman who is not a Christian, and a person who has detransitioned, who is going to be maybe much more critical of certain trans ideologies. You are going to agree and disagree with some of those testimonies. That's not the point. The point of a testimony is not to say, agree with everything this person says. The point of these testimonies is to give you a range of stories so that you can understand the beautiful diversity of trans experiences. Now, some people are going to look at the website and say, you're platforming this person, you're platforming that person. I'm going to roll my eyes and say, you don't get what we are doing. Non-negotiable for me is I think it's very, very important for Christians to listen to people, listen to stories, not so that you can agree with everything, but simply so that you can understand what is going on. All right, friends, thanks for listening to this episode, and looking forward to 2025.
This show is part of the Converge Podcast Network.